Good morning. Welcome to another Score Sheet podcast. I'm happy to say that I have my longtime friend and also fantasy baseball expert Todd Zola with me today. Todd has been running mastersball.com for many, many years. How are you doing, Todd?
Jeff, is it wrong that I decided not to turn my radio on today? Well, stream music over my computer and open the window just to hear the birds chirp?
You mean it's
I,
spring out there in Boston?
yeah, I heard some birds in the morning and so you know what? I'm gonna leave the streaming music. We don't turn the radio on. Wow, haven't done that for a while. Yeah, don't turn on my satellite radio streaming online and just listen to the birds chirp. I only did it about an hour. I broke down eventually and turned the 70 station on, but it was kind of nice for an hour just to take it in. It's been a long winter. Actually, it hasn't even been a long winter. It's been a long month.
It,
The winter was actually going pretty quickly and pretty cool. You know what? As I'm looking out the window now, I see snow falling.
yeah.
Really little bit, but I just jinxed it.
No, the baseball season has started out. I mean, it's always a little cold, and there's always some cold games early in the season, but
Yeah.
we're now in the third week of the season, and I just saw the Minnesota game. It's like the temperature at first pitch is supposed to be 32 degrees or something like that. I live in California, and the foothills. It's supposed to snow at my house tomorrow. So
Huh.
I think that means there's going to be cold baseball games for a while yet to come.
Right. And as far as, fantasy goes and score sheet goes, that matters. And it's not just, look, you turn on the TV and you see these guys wearing ski masks and, who's it bad? I can't tell because it's got the ski mask on. But, so players are uncomfortable, not loose. But it hurts the travel of the ball. The ball doesn't travel as well, let alone pitchers getting warmed up, hitters getting warmed up. So you can expect a lot more close scoring games early in the season. There'll still be some games where they're scoring some runs because not everybody's playing in a cold weather environment, and there's domes. But it's a good time of year, especially in score sheet, where you can use splits or use your bench players to get in the lineup that week. Where you may know, you may need to look at weather. I'll admit I don't look very much towards the weather on Mondays or Sunday nights when I send in my score sheet lineup, probably because it hasn't been this extreme.
No,
But
I
yeah.
agree. We all for years now have kind of looked to see who's playing in Colorado that week and
Yeah,
bench pitchers and bench hitters. But I think you're right. And it's not done yet, as we just talked about. So maybe we
right.
should all be playing pitchers that are pitching games in Minnesota, Detroit, Boston, whatever, and we should all be playing hitters that are playing their games this week in San Diego or LA or Miami. Um,
Right.
yeah, I think it's amazing the little things you can do to really make your team do better.
And nowadays, with so much information out there, and not just out there, but out there for free and accessible on Twitter, silly guys doing podcasts and stuff like that, you need to go back to the minutia to get the edge. It used to be, the more you knew, the more current events you knew, the better off you were. But now everybody knows them, or at least if they don't, they should. It's there. They had, to do the legwork, but it's there for them. So now we're back to a point where it is the minutia that could separate the wheat from the chaff. The DFS game, especially, I think it's most apropos there because it's you really
Yes.
pinpoint the sample down to one day. But I think it's important. I mean, rotisserie, standard rotisserie, it's 1 week out of 50 out of 26. It matters, but maybe not as much. Score sheet, it definitely matters because I think you can, it's 1 week. You can get that edge if you can go 5-2 and not 3-4 1 week because you knew to play, I don't know, Nick Pivetta 1 week over, maybe you picked him as your sixth or seventh pitcher, but use him now. Plus, he's doing pretty well. Use him now. I mean, I do think you can game an edge,
Yeah.
especially this season. And you know what, folks? It's going to be this way for a few years. They've announced 5 more years of this staggered schedule, and I think they have to start it earlier because they certainly don't want to go later. So I think
No.
next year, we'll talk about this in March as something to think about in your draft.
Yeah, I think that's what I need to do in the March part. It's a little late now to say what you should have done in week one or
Right.
two or even three. But yeah, I think in March, when you and I talk, we should remember to remind people that if it's 33 degrees in Detroit, it's because it seems like it hurts the hitters a lot more than the pitchers. The pitchers, at least for whatever reason, seem to be doing pretty well, especially the starting pitchers this year.
Yeah, I got two theories for that. Well, whether or not they're just me blowing wind or whatever. The first is, I think people talk about this. This is what they've always talked about. But the pitchers out there at least working up a sweat. Getting out there 8 innings. Well, nowadays 5 innings. But they're still working up a sweat, so they're staying fairly warm. They can put the stuff on in the dugout, whatever. Hitters, they're at bat once every 2 or 3 innings. They're jogging out to the cold outfield. Maybe you get a fly ball, who knows? So I think it's a lot easier for the day of the game for the pitchers to get a burn, to work up a sweat, and to stay loose that way. This is the part that I'm sort of wondering more anecdotally than anything else. Season started earlier this year. I don't think spring adjusted too much, and there's a lot of bad relief pitching going on. I'm wondering, it's narrative, it's nothing I've proven or anything, but I'm wondering if teams spend so much time trying to get their starting pitchers ready to go that they kind of neglect getting their bullpen, especially the back end of the bullpen. I think the starter, the closers and the setup guys get their work, but I think the back end of the bullpen gets the work, but it might be against the lesser hitters on the other team, stuff like that. And I think that's showing early on in that, some closers are failing. They always fail, but I think there's a higher rate now. It may also be that relief pitching's terrible, which I think has to do with it. But I wonder if some of the relief pitchers got ample work during the spring to really, hit the ground running during the season.
Yeah, maybe. I guess something I've kind of always said for years is that there's a reason pitchers are middle relievers. Maybe not closers, but at least middle relievers, and that's because they're not the best pitchers on their staff.
Exactly.
And my theory about relievers is you really need, well, speaking score sheet now, roto middle relievers are, well, they're becoming more important, I guess, because of strikeouts. But in score sheet, they've always been really important. And my theory with them is I don't spend a whole lot of time or draft picks early in the preseason picking them. It seems like every year there's just a ton of relievers that kind of come out of nowhere, and by May they're pitching well, and somehow they do it all season long. And so I usually wait, well, I don't wait entirely, but I like using my in-season supplemental picks, unless I really have a hole to fill, on relievers that have started out well, because it's too easy to pick relievers in March because they had a good year last year, and then, like you said, they basically stink up the joint the next year, because if they were good enough to be consistent year after year after year, they'd either be a starter or a closer in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I like to get a good trio up front, a closer who doesn't have to, as you know, I think we're preaching to the converted here. You don't have to have a guy getting saves. You need a guy with good ratios.
Right.
I'd like to think Archie Bradley will eventually, if he's starting to pitch well, he's my closer in my score sheet team, and I know he's not closing for the Diamondbacks. You like to get that, and you also like to get a couple lefties are pretty stable, lefty loogie relievers, because that's all they do. But as far as filling out the back of the bullpen, I think you're right. As far as you don't have to get the Dylan Betances and the David Robertsons, you can. It's all team. If you've got a really good keeper list and can afford to jump those guys a little early, it's all contextual. But I fill in your batters first, even your platoon hitters first, and I think we've talked about this, and sitting in the stands at Arizona Fall League, and especially I know not all your leagues are keeper leagues. One of my favorite things about the score sheet is the drafts are times kind of cool. One of the in-season draft is right after the entry draft, so you get teams that are rebuilding that are drafting in score sheet the guys that were just picked up on the major league draft,
the amateur draft in June.
Yeah, the amateur draft. Yeah, and then you've got other people who are competing that could care less about a guy that's 22 that that may make a score sheet difference in 5 years. We're picking up the middle relievers. We're picking up the Whit Merrifields of Chris Taylor's from last year that emerged that maybe weren't picked up. So it's kind of nice. You can go either way. And I think people are looking for the hitters. So the middle relievers you talk about, there's a huge supply and not much of a demand. There should be a higher demand, but there's not. There's a nice demand, a low demand. So you're able to really supplement your relief corps. So hang in till June, and you usually can do that. And then, like you're saying, get a couple of those relievers. Score sheet gives us 30 30-man rosters, not 25, so you can, you have plenty of space to put them on. Plus, you're going to get some injuries anyway. So I like that idea as far as don't force David Robertson, don't force Joe Kelly, don't force. I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
Don't want to be American League centric. Someone in the National League, Pedro Strop. They'll come organically in the course of the season.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think picking up relievers or even trading for relievers is, they're just plain important, especially like you said to start. Starting pitchers don't go 8 innings anymore. It's,
Huh.
They lead the league with 205 innings pitched, and 160 innings pitched is, what was it, like there was only 25 pitchers last year that had more than 160 innings, something like that. So you need someone to pitch the 6th, the 7th, the 8th. You can't just have a closer. You can't just have Wade Davis and some starting pitchers. That just doesn't work.
Yeah, the average start in major leagues is down to 5.5 innings. It's at an all-time low, and that transcends to score sheet because, like, the sim kind of matches up with how the pitcher did that week. So if a pitcher was lifted in the 4th, your chances are you're gonna, if you got that guy going, unless he has 2 starts and evened it out with a good start the second time, you're probably going to pay for it. He's not going to go very far on your score sheet team because he's not going to be doing very well, and it's going to be reflected in your, whenever your hook is, he's going to, or if your hook is long, you're going to have a bad performance for longer innings. So, the point being, you're going to need an extra reliever, and it's a trick because, deeper, some people may only be maybe playing a little bit shallower league, but I play in a 30-team MLB, league where you're using guys to platoon. So if you use guys to platoon, if you've got your Matt Joyce and your Brandon Geyer, that's 2 roster spots. So with those 2 roster spots, that's 1 fewer reliever you can carry. But like I said, with 30 possible players to carry in the team, then that's kind of mitigated. It works out. Yeah. It works out so you can do it.
Well, you do. I mean, score sheet teams have large. There's kind of a difference between lineups and rosters. They have larger rosters, and those guys will come in automatically. But if you want to give strategy numbers and say who's playing, yeah, it's a 30-man limit in the lineup card. Well, so we've agreed on relievers. What about? Let's see. So we are in the 3rd week. There are some surprises, or at least, well, surprise is a good word. I'm kind of maybe a more negative guy than some. I tend to fixate on the bad surprises, like Evan Longoria, who's got like 4 hits in 10 games. Mm-hmm. So we have talked about him off air a little bit. You came up with an interesting theory. Well, if you don't want to bench him entirely, maybe just start him against one kind of pitcher, not the other, and that way you're hedging your bet a little. You're only playing him half the time.
Yeah, no, Longoria is a good example. The idea being that in score sheet you get to put a lineup versus lefties and a lineup versus righties, and I don't think you guys are so granular that when you sim Longoria, you're only using if he's pitching against a lefty, you don't use your stats for the weeks against a lefty. You just use a stat for the week.
Right. We use a player's entire stats, and then he does better or worse versus a lefty or righty based on his historic platoon split. So if Longoria has always hit lefties better, he's going to hit lefties better than he does righties in score sheet. But, most of us, even if you're not platooning him, even if you're 2 third basemen both hit right-handed, it's still, if you're tired of him going 1 for 20, but you don't really want to bench him and have him do what McCutchen did the other day and get 6 hits, exactly. Yeah, start him against one or the other and play your other guy.
Right. Because the point being too, even when a guy's slumping, he usually will be better from the platoon advantage. So even if he's slumping, he's going to do a little better versus lefties. It may not be as good as normal. So that's the idea. You don't want to completely miss the breakout. Most teams face 2 on the average, 2 lefties a week. Sometimes 1 to 4 on the average 2. So you don't completely miss the breakout, or and then you just put him in the next week. Whereas in Roto, if you want to bench him for, a, I don't know, Christian Villanueva or something like that, and we don't know what's going on there, you lose the entire week. But at least in score sheet, maybe you win those 2 games.
Yeah, you can hedge your bets a little. So, but you're a more positive guy than me, overall. So there's probably some guys that are pleasantly surprising you that maybe you want to mention, give people an idea of who to trade for, or we do have our first in-season draft coming up next week. Though in score sheet, most of the players that are actually doing well are picked. So it's more of a who do you bench or start or who do you maybe trade for. But you got a couple guys that have broken out you're really happy with?
Yeah, I think I mentioned Pavetta earlier, maybe not. I mean, Nick Pavetta is a guy. I look more for the pitching because pitching tends to stabilize a little faster than hitting. It's there's still I mean we'll use Ohtani as example. He's faced the A's twice. We know he's going to be good, but he's not facing the A's every week. So there's going to be some rougher games ahead. So it does pitcher skills do matter what teams are facing, but they're still their skills. Whereas some hitters maybe have faced a real tough array of pitchers early on. If you face the Red Sox or the Nationals or the Mets pitching early on, and some teams have played home and home so far, so you face the staff twice, so the numbers can get skewed. But I mentioned Pavetta, he's striking players out. He could be in your fifth or sixth, or maybe in your bullpen now. Ronaldo Lopez, the American League, is a guy that he had pedigree, and in Roto you kind of put him on your reserve, and think score sheet too, and just waiting for the breakout. And it's still a little early, obviously, but you're seeing positive signs with a guy like Ronaldo Lopez, the White Sox. And another thing about score sheet, we don't care. In Roto, we care that the White Sox are terrible, and he's probably not going to rack up the wins. We don't care about that in score sheet. We're worried about the ratios, the numbers. We want the because it depends upon our hitters, not the White Sox hitters. He's got 7 walks, Lopez does, in 13 innings, but he does have 11 strikeouts, only 1 homer allowed. So I'm not happy about the walks, but I think historically he's shown that. Well, I think maybe walks is what he needs to prove that he can keep low. He actually no, walks has been okay historically. What he needed to do is get the strikeouts back up to where he showed in the minors, and at least thus far he's showing in that direction. But 95 miles an hour. He is a guy that if he happens to be available in a shallow league or in a mixed league, that Lopez looks like he's going to start, and starting pitching is just so hard to find in the score sheet.
Now, well, you mentioned wins. In rotisserie, the fact Kershaw has 0 wins in 3 starts really hurts someone. But in score sheet, he gave up, I think, 1 run in his first 2 games against the Giants. He got no wins, but
probably 3-0 in a score sheet team.
Yeah, for a score sheet league, he's giving you back the exact value you expect from a Clayton Kershaw. So obviously, I like the fact we use ERA more than wins, or else we wouldn't have designed the game that way. Though actually this year, early in the year, I don't look for pitchers with great ERAs so much because 1 3-run homer can ruin your ERA. It's like you said, the strikeouts, the ratios, maybe how hard they're throwing, or just even the things the manager or the beat reporter is saying about, his curveball's the best it's ever been, something like that.
Yeah, velocity's tough because the velocity readings, they seem to be a little bit all over the place this early in the season, and there's some speculation that there's some customization of the readings. We went through that last year with Detroit, between StatCast and some other things. So I'm beginning to wonder if they're trying to normalize where they're taking the readings from, that sort of thing. But then, for every guy that you think is a little bit low, there's another pitcher that's above, and it's not consistent within the same team. So I think it's just the weather, and different pitchers are just at different states of getting loose and the whatnot. Along those lines, I've been thinking a lot about Luis Castillo, who was a darling, and I think all not just rotisserie but score sheet, and we saw his numbers outstanding, but we're looking at his numbers. He came up mid-season. We haven't seen a Luis Castillo start the major leagues in April. Cincinnati, where it's cold still. I'm wondering if I'm not getting overly concerned about Castillo. I may have maybe off on my season-long projection because I took what he did, starting in the middle of the season when it was warm, and prorated that out for the whole year. So we may be finding is I think he'll eventually get to that point, but I'm wondering if a guy like Castillo is off to a slow start because we didn't factor in April numbers because we didn't see him. He did it in the minors, but the minors are different. So I think I got to think of more Luis Castillos that came up mid-season and really impressed. And going forward, keep in mind that you may want to, project them and then back off that just a little bit because we haven't seen what they do in the cold. I don't want to profile, for Latin American players. I have no idea. I mean, that's kind of
Right.
that's what the guys on the radio will say. I don't know that that's a fact. It sounds great on radio because, you didn't have to worry about
That
snowstorms where he grew up. I don't
that
know if it's true or
Hispanic
not.
players don't play in the cold as well as a Northern
Yeah,
American
I don't want to
player.
go down that road because
Yeah.
I don't know.
But it's
Uh,
certainly possible that there are just individual players, Hispanic or not,
Absolutely.
that play better in warm weather than cold. Or, I mean, it's early. You can have two mediocre starts, and if you do them in July where they're buried in a whole season's of stats, no one notices. And
Yeah.
if you have them the first to start the season, then it looks like, holy moly, this guy's got a 7 ERA. Why do I have him on my team?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, folks, Todd, Masters Ball at masterswithansball.com. Todd is one of those fantasy folks that obviously plays score sheet a lot. So you're not going to just be getting rotisserie advice. One thing he offers his platinum subscribers is he'll answer your direct questions. So if you say, should I platoon these two guys in score sheet, he understands what you're talking about. He's not going to give you a roto answer. And he's run it forever. He gives very personal service and tons of tidbits. Cannot recommend it more. And then I'm going to call you, Todd, or send you an email in a few days right before I draft and say, okay, these three guys are available. Which one should I take? Because, I mean, it's a little hard to tell people who to take in the first draft because each league has its own undrafted player list. And there's just not that many guys that are on every league's list. There's always, it's so different. It's a very specific thing.
Yeah, and something to keep in mind, too, is score sheet as well as roto. You may look at the available players and you may say, well, the best player plays third base. I'm pretty strong at third base. Unless you have a hole to fill elsewhere, don't just say, I'm not going to put a bid in. Improve your reserves. Don't just improve your active lineup because you're going to need those reserves down the line. If nothing else, you've got to trade. I got to trade now. So I see a lot of people, well, I'm going to just, I'm not going to worry about Fab this week because I don't have any injuries. Well, you got a pretty crappy reserve list. And you're wasting an opportunity to improve with a pretty good free agent list, which is going to hurt you down the line. So it takes time. It's not hard. It just takes some time. So take the time to improve your reserves too.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously, if you've got two second basemen and they're both hurt, you need to draft a second baseman. But
exactly,
as long as you don't have a glaring hole, I'm a big fan of pick the best athlete this early in the year because you are going to have injuries later. And I mean, trading is, it's not, we don't have really a cut add system. We're not most score sheet leagues aren't shallow leagues with cuts and adds. So if you want to improve your team, trades are how you're going to do it. And if you already have two decent third basemen and you draft a third one, somebody in your league is going to need a third baseman because there just aren't 20 of them out there.
Right. Even if you trade for a pick in the next draft. I mean, you don't have to trade for a player. Trade for a pick in the next draft because that could be especially if it's an early pick, that could be very valuable. So exactly, just fill in your holes, but don't just say don't just what I'd rather listen to the birds chirp instead of putting some it's really not that hard to make the drop ads in your make out the list or to keep up with the draft. So yeah, it's one of those things where you want to. You said improve the reserves, even if it's you think you're strong because it's not going to stay that way.
Right. And then my basic rule in score sheet is when in doubt, pick a pitcher because you can never have enough pitching in score sheet. I think even people that have played for 10 years, they forget that little tidbit. And I think it's sexier sometimes to draft a hitter that's already got 5 home runs, but the pitcher that you draft, if he does it all well, is liable to help you more down the road.
Yeah, hopefully we're preaching to the obvious here, but it's just the hitter is one guy in your lineup. The pitcher, if it could be one of your 5 starting pitchers, so he's going to influence your team a lot more than a back end hitter, especially if it's a guy that it becomes your 3rd or 4th starter, not your 5th. Plus, the thing with starting pitching is you never know who's going to take the next step and become one of your keepers.
Yeah, no pitching. Pitching is key. We can all agree on that, can't we? I think, to be sure. Well, Todd, it's been great talking to you as always. Folks, once again, it's mastersball.com. He's got a variety of things you can read, and then he's got subscription services if you want more. And we'll talk again in a few weeks, and one of us will be bragging about our team, and hopefully the other one will at least be happy with their team.
Yeah, well, right. A little bit of a slow start. I think we talked offline because we like talking about our teams. My pitching was suspect, but it's doing really well. My hitters, I thought were going to be fine. They're off to a slow start. You know what? So if we're going to be 2-4, I'd rather have it that way because I know my hitters are going to hit. And if Pavetta can continue to pitch and some of these guys can continue to pitch, I'll eventually, just I happen to be in a weak division. At least it was last year. So maybe I can sneak into the playoffs, and you never know what happens after that.
Right. Well, and I think improving your hitting is a lot easier. If you're going to make a trade, trading for someone's outfielder that's hitting pretty well is a heck of a lot easier than trying to pick up another third starting pitcher.
And you can always platoon a hitting spot. Yeah. You can't platoon a starting pitcher.
Right. Well, like I said, it's been great talking to you, and we'll do it again soon.
All right, man.
Thanks, Todd.